Okay, so recording now. Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for reminding me. So we said that probably the most important thing that you can think about, the most important product is the gefilte fish. Okay, so those who are brave enough, it's coming now. And actually, I don't know if you're going to have a chance to try them because you're going to be by yourself, most likely. But we'll see what happens. Try it on. I dare you. All right. So who were the first fish? Theoretically, what we know is that all fish come from a common ancestor. And probably the first one who were evolved were the hagfish, the jawless fish. Fish without jaws, like the hagfish and lampreys. And then later on, we had cartilaginous fish, which is basically rays and sharks. And later on, the bony fish, which most of you know, the ray fin fish, and then other ones as well. Eventually, what we call as tetrapods is the formation of, here we go, is from amphibians. So this is how people believe that has come true to realize. Now, what we find is really interesting. If you look in the water, you know there's about 70% of the water is marine, and about 30% is fresh water. Sorry, in land is about 30%. Just only 1% is just about fresh water, and most of it is locked actually in icebergs. So so we have less than one. It's about 1% of the fresh water is available for actually having fish living in them. But if you look globally, the amount of fish species, not how much, but who they are, you can see that about 60% is marine and about 40% is fresh water. How come that you have such a big difference? Maybe you can give me an answer. It's an ecological answer. Any answer? Anyone guesses? Anyone out there?
Would it be the size differences of the water bodies? Like the ocean is gigantic, so I imagine there's a lot more room for fish to exist than the amount of fresh water that exists.
Yeah, but according to that, you should have much more marine species than freshwater fish in relative numbers. Right? Anyone?
But also a big part of the ocean is like completely dark. Okay,
good. All right. Actually, the answer comes in the freshwater. In the freshwater, how come you have such a small amount of freshwater, but such a big amount of a freshwater species? The reason is, and I don't know if Boaz talked to you about speciation, how you can form new species, but
it's the change in genus, correct?
Yeah, I mean the change how we have one species and then you have a different species. How come you have so many species in freshwater rather than in marine? And though freshwater that takes up just a small amount of water that there exists in the water in the world. So one of the reasons I think about is that each river or each lake has its own attributes, and according to that, it was separate from another one. And so there's one species of water that can, one body of water, for instance, a lake, Tanganyika, for instance, in Africa, which you see a lot of cichlids because they all had species, special conditions. If you go to a lake not too far away from there, conditions would be different, and you could have species evolving differently because the bodies of water are separate from one place to another. So you have different evolutions in the very close, geographically close areas, but they're not connected areas. I'm trying to get the context because I can't see you. Hold on a second. Okay. Okay, so I'm back on. And yeah, I see macroinvertebrates. In Sarah and Caroline, you're right. Not all the fish survive in salty water, and the opposite as well. Very few make it. Very few of them are both in estuaries. And you're right, but you can do sharks, for instance. Some species of sharks, like bull sharks, you can see actually in fresh water. They can actually go travel about 50, 60, 70 kilometers upwater, freshwater rivers. You need to know where to go and bathe. All right. And if you look at it from the marine area, just looking at marine, you can see most of the fish that exist in marine, they're all in shallow waters. Not too many in pelagic, and other is usually what you mentioned before is the deep. The ones that are usually in the deep, that's the big one, and from the others. And you can see deep water benthic organisms, it's only about 12% of what we saw before. And most fish are found, and it's not mentioned here, in tropical waters. And unfortunately, it's where people like to stay. So there's a lot of times there's an interference between what people and between habitats of people and habitats of fish. So the history goes on. People have been fishing for many, many years. And you can see here, this is a bone, a fish a fish hook made out of bone. It's dated about 40,000 BC. I don't know if it's right. It sounds a little too much. And you can see here something much more similar to this, but you can see here, this is the Mediterranean in the Black Sea region. You can see that's about 45 centuries before Christ. And so people in this area were fishing many, many, many years, and you know there's a good record, not good, but relatively good record of fishing that's been done here by Phoenicians and by the Greeks, and many years ago. So we know fishing was probably one of the bigger hunting methods that have been around. Now, if you look at the still hunting or fishing, you can see here in inland water, meaning freshwater and marine, and you can see the increase in the amount of landing or yield, how much fish has been caught in the years from 1950 to here it's 2012. You can see here in fresh water there's an increase, and you can see also in marine water there's an increase. But I want to show you two things which are important to you. Maybe you can show me two differences between these two, having a look at it. I'm waiting. If you can write one thing or two things, or talk to me.
The marine waters has evened out.
Here.
Yeah.
Exactly, that's one. And different tonnage. Thank you, Jacob. If you look here, the marine freshwater, we're talking about, I don't know, it's probably now it's about more than 12, probably 13, 14, something like that. And you can see here millions of tons, about 90 million tons. It's about almost what it is now. And as you mentioned, almost all of them were there was an increase in the amount of marine landings until about the 1990s, and since then, pretty much leveled out. Question is, why? Obviously, most people go in the fish and marine environment because there's more fish there. Why do we have it? What does the x-axis represent again? Years, 1950 to 2012. I'm listening.
I was just going to say, because the fish populations have decreased, and so it's been harder to catch as much fish, even though demand has gone up.
This is exactly right. Okay, so this is one of the things that I want. One of the take-home messages you need to get is eventually that we're trying too harder to catch more fish, or we're not succeeding very well. The question is obviously what's the alternatives. But it's exactly it. Most fishing is conducted in marine areas, and fishery has been quite well exploited. And if you look at it here, you can see the capture production here. And since then, the production is still increasing. And if you look at it, you can see there's an increase by aquaculture. So today, there's a 50% chance that what you eat, you get on your plate, that let's say it's marine, doesn't come actually from marine, it actually from some kind of aquaculture production method. There's various ways of doing it. But I'm going to concentrate mostly on this and not on the aquaculture. How can you have how can you have that so many people trying to catch fish and they're not being able to do that? So let's see what the idea is about learning about fisheries and not aquaculture today. And as you said before, and you're right about this, you can see here the increase in the population. This is the worldwide population. You can see here increase in the demand for food and apparent consumption. And here the non-food uses for aquaculture, for fish. So you can see basically in the 70s pretty much leveled off. So most of what we catch is actually for food. And we already saw that if it's increasing, we still need to provide, and the way we provide it, as I mentioned here, is by using aquaculture, because the marine environment does not provide as much as it is. And the question is, what happens in every place and how can it work out? Why is it happening? So I'm going to give you a general overview of the various trends in the world and also in the Mediterranean Sea, a little bit about Israel, how much their fisheries, what's going on with fisheries, and who they are, who they catch, how much they catch, pretty much. And then we're going to go and understand maybe the mechanisms, how they catch them. And eventually we're going to end up with why we have this decrease in what we can do about the decrease. And we're going to talk about conservation eventually, not today. So I'm going to leave something there. So here we go. World fisheries, various number of species, and you can see most people catch the big ones. The big ones, I mean, these are the big ones: anchovies, pollocks, sardines, cod, herring, tunas, skipjack tunas, and so on. And you can see pretty much, if you look here, this is the years, over the years. And you can see there's an increase in 1960s. First of all, you can see here, this is the reported catch, and this is for each one of them. You can see here in 10,000s of tons. And what you can see here, a lot of anchovies being caught, pollocks, and sardines. They are the big ones. So this is the major three organisms that people actually like to eat. What does the big color refer to? It's bycatch. It's others, everything else, because there's so many species. So people obviously, if for instance, I'll just take an example for you, 1970, if I take it and see what species are being caught, it's about 10,000 of them, 10,000 tons. Actually, you need to double it by 1,000. So it's 10 million, okay? So 10 million of it being caught, which is anchovies, much less of this, which is, I don't know, you can figure out how much it is. And all this, which is most of it, is been caught by different kinds of species.
I have a question. Is there a difference in, just because I'm like, I'm a little colorblind. So is there a difference in color between like the first section and then underneath the reported catch line? Is that a different thing, or is that the same color?
No, this is one color, second, third, fourth, fifth.
Yeah, I know. On the very like the two.
And all this is one color. Yeah. Okay, so all this is one color. Right, all this is one
color. Other. And so that's in that, like other.
Right, this is other because there's so many other species. But it's interesting that we have three major species. And this thing is this trend of having these three major species. And by the way, this is pollocks and anchovies. Okay, just to show you how they look like. You've probably seen them on a pizza, the anchovies, not living. And you can see that the length is by functional groups. You can see how by size and location. You can see that here medium pelagic ones. And we have medium demersal meaning they're close to the bottom. And you have also small pelagics. This is the anchovies, for instance. They're relatively small. So these are the big ones. You can also have a little bit of the benthopelagic. Those that can be on the bottom, a little bit up in the bottom. You can see the different sizes of them as well. So these are the big ones we're talking about. And if you look at the Mediterranean Sea, the picture is pretty much the same. You have small pelagics and medium demersal and small pelagics as well. Medium pelagics. So it's a similar picture, and you can see here, for instance, the bycatch here. Sorry, those are not reported. I mean, others is not well defined, so that's why it's smaller. It's exactly the same. And you can see here by country, and look, the big ones. Italy is the big one, followed by Spain, followed by Turkey, followed by Greece. So these are the big 4 countries that fish in the Mediterranean Sea. And you can see that the biggest one, obviously, is Italy, by far. One of the reasons is that there's a lot of sea, a lot of coastline, and Italians like to fish a lot because it's available. If you take of, for instance, Israel is not even in the picture. Israel is somewhere here, and the others somewhere here. So we're very, very small because we don't have a long line, and also we don't have too many fish. I'm going to show you this in an example. And here we go. Why we have it. So you can see the different species richness and what they found, the spatial patterns of the species. And you can see here, these are fish species. This is an overall map. And you can see the blue ones are small, the red ones are high. Okay, it's here. And you can see, obviously, there's not much species here, much more species on the in the Western Basin. And if you separate it by ray fins, meaning the ones we are commonly eating, you can see a similar picture. And even a stronger trend, if you look at the elasma branch is sharks and rays. And endemic species, you can see that endemism is high in the Aegean Sea, but not too much all over the other places. In our area, we have a lot of alien species. So we're getting one thing. And we're going to talk about these alien species, because we're going to talk about aliens in general in invasive species. So can someone tell me why we have this kind of picture? There's more on the western part, less on the eastern part?
Because of the currents, the currents don't push as much plankton, and so the fish don't disperse as much towards our side.
Less likely. It's not the big deal. It's the smaller deal. Again, temperature is also, but it's not a big deal. Temperature is important. It's open to the rest of the ocean. That's one thing. Okay, there's an entrance to Gibraltar, and then there's more species here, and then there is over here. But even if you look at numbers, it's going to be higher numbers in this area than it is in here. I should add actually this. But definitely, temperature-wise, and all the reasons that you mentioned is pretty much true. Okay, one of the reasons is that this area is, I don't know if you remember the last picture was I showed you, who was a Jacob nutrient richness. The last one I told you before is that it's very similar to what we talked about nutrients. Low nutrients, high nutrients. It should be very obvious that if there's low nutrients, I mean there's less phytoplankton. There's less phytoplankton, there's less food. There's less food, there's less fish. So according to that, we have this working out for here. Obviously, something is different is working with the alien fish here, and we should and I will address it later on in a different talk. So the economical waters of Israel is relatively small. It's basically what you see here in this area. It's about 30,000 square kilometers. The sea shelf is much smaller. It's not big, it's quite small. So actually close to about this area. And the international water is even smaller, but it's really, really small, just a sliver. And primary production is low. We just talked about it. And if you see here, this is the trends in the fisheries in Israel. And you can see here at sardines are a major deal, a little bit of goatfish, which is benthic organisms. They have this babunia, if you guys know it. It's the common Arabic name. And some porgies and sea breams. And the reason we have porgies and sea breams, by the way, is because these are invasive species, just to let you know. So we can see an increase in the amount of invasive species, which is very, very sad to see. But overall, if you look at the reported catch, first of all, it's quite small. Look about the numbers. about 3,500 tons a year, and it's really, really small compared to what we saw before. And look what happened. There's been an increase, and since the mid like 2005, there's a decrease in the catch. Okay, and you can see here who they are. Basically, this is trends in Israel. Most of them are perch-like, meaning like small fish, other fish with invertebrates. So that's what they catch in general. And oh, okay. So if we're gonna go back. It tells me that it's gonna be in 10 minutes. It's gonna be. I'm gonna run out of time because I didn't sign up correctly. So if we're gonna get once we get about this. I'm gonna start I'm gonna restart I'm gonna all disconnect and reconnect again, unfortunately. So we have 10 minutes on this, and then we're gonna go for another one. So before that, I'm gonna send you a link in the email, and then you can get back into it again. I'm sorry. All right. So this is the picture that we have in Israel. We don't have too much. What we do see is an increase in the amount of aquaculture. So aquaculture is taking its place. Not too much, by the way. Numbers are relatively small in aquaculture as well. Very good at producing a new ideas, high tech. So we're good with very good ideas, but we're not very good in actually producing. We just give it to the world and then keep on doing something new. We're not very good in aquaculture as well. Let's go on with fishing methods. I'm going to show you a few fishing methods, and you're going to see how they work and how the people catch them. So the easiest one, other than just lines, obviously, is seine nets. It's basically a net that goes in. There's a floats on the top and weights on the bottom. Just straight net, just a small wall. One person goes in, walks around, and comes back, and then people start pulling him out, and all the things that you found here is gone out. It's non-selective. It usually catches juveniles because juveniles like to be in a very, very shallow area, which is a problem. And it's very local, so the impact is quite limited. Another way of doing it is what we call a drift net. Not necessarily has to be a drift net, by the way. It can be anchored as well. In Israel, they usually anchor it. And what this is basically a wall. You can see weights on the bottom, floats on the top. This is mid-water. It's not on the bottom. And it catches all the fish that swim from one place to another. It's relative, the net of the eye is relatively small. We call this gill nets many times because this fish can swim in, then it cannot go back because the gills are open. And you can then go backwards, or you can go forwards, so it gets stuck in it. Now they can get pretty long. Could be hundreds of kilometers, close to about a kilometer or so, and it's very non-selective. Another method for doing it, for catching fish, is long lines. Long lines are actually very, very common, and this is an amazing thing. Basically, what it is just a long line. And from time to time, you have a float, keep it on. You have bait on the bottom. And the idea about it is, first of all, it's non-discriminate. It's targeted towards certain kind of species, usually for sharks and big fish. And that's the idea, not catching the small ones. It's specific. But sometimes you have turtles getting on, and sharks, which are not targeted species. By the way, this could be long. This could be about tens of kilometers long sometimes. Maybe I'm a little over it. But this is kilometers long. So what basically these people, when they do it, they deploy the lines, and then they come around and pick it up. Just they work around the hour, 24 hours a day. It's like a machine. It's crazy how they work. Very difficult work working as in a fishing method. You can see as long as 100 kilometers. Wow. Okay. And it's far out. Probably the most destructive way of fishing is using trawling, bottom trawling, I should say. Trawling is basically a net that's dragged on the bottom. You have these things open up, it's called doors, and you have a float on the top, and wheels on the bottom and just runs. And runs on the bottom, catches whatever you have. I'm going to show you an example how it looks like. And it's quite amazing to see how it is. And just think about the impact does this have on I need to remember how to do this. The impact it has on here we go, on the environment. Now check this out. This is amazing. There's no music to this, by the way. Oh, there is. Do you hear it, by the way?
No, I don't hear anything.
All right, I'm gonna put it on later. See how this coral was taken in? So this is the wheels. You see the wheels. Here on the bottom, there's a chain, and it brings all the fish up, and it gets caught inside. Okay, just to show you how it looks like. It's quite terrible. And if you look at the bottom of these things, learn how to do this. So if I go with the trawling, for instance, and I see trawls, they're scratching in the bottom. And this is how it works. You can see some areas, this is not common, by the way. At some places where they've done this before, where there were corals. This is before and this is after. And the way it works is like just the door opens up and it runs like you saw before. Everything gets caught inside and scratches the bottom. Those which sometimes they get these fishing nets get caught on the bottom and they stay on the bottom. It's called ghost nets, and they keep catching fish as long as they're on the bottom, and they just get in and die, like very much like gill nets that I showed you before. Okay, Alana, by the way, the beeping is not me, and I'm working with a headset. I don't have something specific, and I'm sorry, this is the best I can do for today. And what you can see here, look at the scale. This is about a 10-kilometer scale, and you can see the scraping of trawlers. And on the bottom, relatively shallow. By the way, shrimpers do the same thing. All right. Some ways of working.
Is there any legislation? Sorry, is there any legislation that has been implemented to try and reduce bottom trawling effects or anything like that?
There is, and the problem is it's with everything which is related to fishing and fisheries in general. Is once they go into the sea, it's very difficult to enforce. And they go far out. Some of them go far out. So there is, and specifically trawlers in the lake. In these last years have been their amounts have been reduced dramatically, and also the places where they can go has been very well restricted to basically areas which have basically gone. So they cannot go in a normal area. In developed countries, they cannot go anywhere they want. They have specific areas where they can trawl, but the numbers have decreased dramatically. And just to give you an understanding. Yeah, so things have been done. Especially in Israel, I'm going to talk to you about this in a second as well. Other way of fishing, this is a method, an old method, it's called traps. Small hole, the big hole turns into a small hole, fish can get in, have difficulties going out. It's nice to have it, it's discriminate, and you have different baits, you can use different species, and it's relatively non-destructive. It's not very common because you don't catch just too many fish. It's more seasonal than higher production. And I think one of the bigger ones is what they call purse seine nets. This is designed for catching open water fish, mainly tunas. And the way they do it is quite interesting. Is just take a look. This is the scale. This is a boat. See another boat over here. Basically, what they do, they lay down. They spot, first of all, usually they bring an airplane to the top if they're looking for tunas. The airplane, what it does is sees dolphins. Usually dolphins fall on top of the tunas. So when they see that and they can spot it, they put a net, a very big net, around the tuna, the whole pod, basically, and goes all the way to the bottom. And then you see these two lines at the end. They start bringing it up. So when they do that, the bottom hole is being closed and eventually brought up. So it becomes shallower and shallower and shallower. And this method can eventually, what they do, they just take him out and bring him onto the boat. One of the things that happens is these dolphins, although they can jump very well, they're not jumping beyond the borders of the seine nets. So many of them die